The last light of day flared like copper dust across the Wyoming sky as Lila Hart stood on the worn porch of her family's struggling homestead, a crumpled letter shaking in her grip. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Her father had just told her he'd bargained her future away, offering her hand to a wealthy stranger in exchange for water rights to save the ranch. "I won't do it," she breathed, voice breaking, as she squeezed the letter into a hard knot. At 20, Lila knew how few doors were open to a woman on the raw frontier, but never had she imagined Amos Hart would trade her as if she were part of the cattle herd. The soft summer dusk mocked her sorrow as she watched him limp toward the weather-scarred house, shoulders bent under the weight of his choice, yet jaw set with stubborn resolve. The long drought had nearly finished them. To Amos, sacrificing his daughter's freedom seemed the only way to keep their land alive. 3 weeks, he had said. Cyrus Flint will come in 3 weeks to claim what's his, both the marriage paper and the deed. Lila's fingers locked around the porch rail until her knuckles whitened. 3 weeks to change her fate. But how? The next morning offered no answers. She moved like a shadow through her chores, gathering the last eggs and pulling weeds from a garden, gasping for rain. With her mother, Lila Hart, gone 5 years now, Lila had carried the housework alone, while her father and young brother struggled to keep the herd alive. "Company's coming!" Amos's voice boomed across the yard. She wiped her dusty hands on her apron and turned to see 3 riders approaching. The lead man sat tall and easy in the saddle, broad-shouldered against the blazing morning sun, a trail-worn Stetson tipped low. "Miss Hart," the stranger called, as he swung down with practiced grace. "I hear you might need a hand or two." "And you are?" Lila asked warily. He swept off his hat, revealing dark, wind-tossed hair and blue eyes sharp as a mountain lake. "Gage Hollis, ma'am. My men and I are driving cattle north to Montana. Your neighbor May Hollis mentioned your family's troubles," he added. Heat flushed Lila's cheeks. News of her father's bargain had spread faster than wildfire. She barely had time to collect herself before Amos strode out, his limp pronounced as he closed the distance. "What business brings you here?" Mr. Amos demanded, planting himself between his daughter and the newcomer. Gage set his hat back on, unhurried. "I'm pushing a herd north. Mrs. Hollis said you might have grazing land to lease for a few days. My cattle need water and feed before we move on." At the mention of money, Amos's hard stance softened. "Maybe we can strike a deal. Water's scarce." "That's what I hear." Gage set his eyes, sliding back to Lila. "Seems water rights are making for some mighty complicated arrangements around here." Lila stiffened. This man knew too much. "Our business is our own," Amos barked. "Sure is," Gage agreed calmly. "Though I wonder if your daughter feels the same about how that business is handled." Bold words. Lila felt a quick spark of admiration even as her father's face darkened. "You'd best watch your tongue, Hollis." "You're on my land," Amos warned. For now, Gage replied evenly, letting the words hang like a challenge in the dry air. That evening, with Gage's campfire flickering by the creek, Lila slipped from the house. She told herself it was only to make sure the strangers weren't taking more than they'd paid for, but deep inside she knew she was drawn to the quiet confidence of the trail boss. "It's risky for a lady to wander alone after dark," he said, without turning, somehow aware of her steps. "This is still my land, Mr. Hollis. I know every inch of it better than you." He finally looked up, firelight throwing rugged shadows across his face. For how much longer Lila hesitated, then sat on a fallen log across from him. "Mrs. Hollis worries for you," Gage went on gently. "She told me your father promised you to Cyrus Flint for the rights to his creek." "And what's that to you?" she shot back, though her voice wavered. "Nothing. Unless you want it to be, he answered, poking at the flames and sending sparks into the dark. He looked to be late 20s, sun-browned and trail-worn, but with eyes that still held kindness. What exactly are you saying, Mr. Hollis? I'm saying a woman isn't stock to be bartered, not in this country, not ever. Fine words, she said bitterly, but they don't change the fact my father's set his mind. Gage leaned forward, voice steady and low. What if there's another way? I've got a proposition. Her heart gave a quick, startled beat. What kind of proposition? I need someone who knows cattle and can keep my books straight in Montana. Someone with brains. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a way out, he corrected. It comes with fair pay and honest work. Lila let out a sharp laugh. And how do I explain vanishing from my own home? My father would send the law after us. Not if you had protection, Gage said simply. Not if you had a husband who could stand legal claim. Her breath caught. Are you asking to marry me, Mr. Hollis? We barely know each other. I'm offering an arrangement, he said, eyes never leaving hers. A marriage in name, if that's what you want, enough to give you the freedom to choose your own life once we reach Montana. A marriage in name only, if that's all you want. Gage, Hollis said quietly, his blue eyes steady. It would give you the right to make your own choices once we reach Montana. Why would you do such a thing? Lila Hart asked, suspicion sharpening her voice. His gaze turned distant. Let's just say I've seen what happens when a woman's pushed into a marriage she never wanted. My sister, he stopped, shook his head. It doesn't matter now. What matters is I can help if you'll let me. Lila rose abruptly, her mind whirling. I need time to think. Time's the one thing you don't have, Miss Hart Gage reminded gently. Cyrus Flint will be here in less than 3 weeks, isn't that so? She nodded, silent. I can keep my herd here only 3 days, he went on. If you decide to go, be ready to ride before dawn on the 3rd day. Back inside the house, Lila's thoughts spun faster than a dust devil. Could she trust this trail boss? Was running off with him any better than being handed to Cyrus Flint? Morning found her still restless. From a distance, she watched Gage at work, driving cattle to fresh grass. His crew clearly respected him, and he treated even the youngest hand with easy dignity. Her brother, Cody Hart, came back glowing from watching the cattle drive. At supper, he said, That Hollis fellow seems decent. Says maybe I could work for him in Montana when I'm older. Lila nearly choked on her stew. Did he now? Amos Hart grunted. You've got plenty of work right here, boy. Once we lock in those water rights with Flint, we'll rebuild this ranch. Setting down her spoon, Lila asked evenly, And what if I refuse to marry Cyrus Flint? The silence in the room was sudden and heavy. Amos's weathered face tightened. There is no refusing, he said. The deal is made. Papers are signed. Papers. You signed contracts about my life without asking me. Lila's voice trembled with anger. I did what I had to, Amos said flatly. That ranch is yours and Cody's future. Flint's a rich man. He'll provide. He's 45 and has buried 2 wives already, she shot back. Amos slammed his fist on the table. Enough. This talk is over. You'll do your duty to this family, same as I've done mine. Blinking back hot tears, Lila pushed from the table and ran to her room. Through her window, she saw the faint glow of Gage Hollis's campfire, and for the first time in days, a thin spark of hope. By the second morning, she knew her answer. While hauling water from the well, she spotted Gage alone near the property line. Mr. Hollis, she called softly, striding toward him. He tipped his hat. Miss Hart. If I accept your offer, she said without hesitation, how can I know you'll keep your word, that I won't just be trading one cage for another? His expression stayed solemn. I'll put it in writing. 6 months from now. If you want out, I'll give you enough money to start fresh. Searching his face for any trace of deceit, she asked, Why help me? What do you gain? A flicker of pain crossed his eyes. Maybe I know what it is to crave freedom. Or maybe I just can't stand by while another woman's forced into a life she didn't choose. You mentioned your sister, Lila pressed gently. Gage's jaw clenched. She married a man our father chose. Seemed respectable until the doors closed. By the time I knew, it was too late. I won't make that mistake again. Drawing a steady breath, Lila said, I'll need to bring a few things. Only what fits in one bag, he warned. We have to travel light and fast. And my brother, she asked, heart twisting. I can't just abandon Cody. He's nearly grown. Gage answered softly. He'll choose his own trail when the time comes. For now, he's safer here with your father. Lila nodded, though it hurt. Tomorrow before dawn, Gage promised I'll be waiting. That night she packed carefully her late mother Lila Hart's silver brush, a small leather-bound journal, a change of clothes, the hidden coins she'd saved. She wrote a letter to Cody, explaining and promising to send for him. Before first light, she slipped from her room, tucking the letter under Cody's door. Pausing at her father's, she whispered, I'm sorry, then walked out into the chill. Gage waited at the edge of the yard, 2 saddled horses ready. Lila's heart pounded as she crossed the frosty grass, each step carrying her from the only home she'd known into the unknown. You came, Gage said simply. Did you doubt I would? She replied, her voice stronger than she felt. I've learned never to assume when it comes to the heart, he said, helping secure her bag. This isn't about the heart, Mr. Hollis. It's survival. A faint smile touched his lips as he mounted. True enough, though in my experience the two often ride closer than folks admit. Together they set off beneath a sky painted with the first blaze of sunrise joining his cowboys and the great cattle herd already moving north. Lila kept her eyes on the boundless land ahead, refusing to look back, for fear her courage might crack. By midday, Lila Hart's shoulders throbbed from hours in the saddle. Though she'd ridden plenty around the home ranch, nothing compared to the steady ground-eating pace Gage Hollis kept as they pushed north. We've got to put miles between us and your pa before he realizes you're gone, Gage explained when they stopped at a creek to water the horses. When we cross into Montana, we'll find a preacher in the first decent town, he added. Lila nodded, trying to calm the flicker of nerves at the thought of standing in front of a minister beside a man she'd only just met. My father won't give up easy, she warned. He's a proud man, Gage said, but pride won't carry him far against a marriage the law recognizes, so I'm just trading one man's authority for another's, she said, the bitterness plain. He turned in the saddle until his serious gaze held hers. I gave you my word, Lila. This marriage is only a way out. Nothing will bind you beyond what you choose. Something in his quiet conviction made her believe him, logic be damned. Near sundown, one of Gage's riders galloped back. Someone's trailing us, one rider pushing hard, your father, Gage asked. She shook her head. Not with that bad leg, must be Cody. Sure enough, 15 minutes later, Cody Hart burst from the twilight, breathless and red-cheeked. Lila, he called, reining in beside her. What are you doing? Pa's beside himself. Lila swung down, laid a calming hand on her brother's lathered horse. I had to leave Cody. I couldn't marry that man. So you're running off with him instead? Cody flicked a sharp glance at Gage, who had politely stepped back to give them privacy. How's this any different? It's completely different, she said firmly. Gage has given me a real choice. In 6 months I can decide my own path. Cody's young face clouded with hurt. What about me, about home? The ranch will still be there, Lila promised, and I'll send for you as soon as I can. Pa says Cyrus Flint will pull his offer if you don't come back. We'll lose everything, Cody warned. There are better ways to save the ranch than selling me like cattle, she replied, her voice steady. Cody looked toward Gage, who pretended not to listen while checking a cinch. Can I trust him to take care of you? I'm going to take care of myself, Lila said with a soft smile. That's the whole point. After a long pause, Cody nodded reluctantly. I didn't tell Pa which way you went, but he'll figure it out. Then you'd better get home before he misses you, she said, brushing a hand across his cheek. Look after him for me. Cody bent for a quick, awkward hug. Right when you can. Of course, she whispered. As Cody turned to leave, Gage stepped forward. Young man, he called, tossing a small leather pouch that jingled in midair. What's this for? Cody asked, catching it. For your silence, Gage said bluntly. And for the extra work with your sister gone. Cody studied the pouch, then tucked it inside his vest. With a final nod, he wheeled his horse and disappeared into the falling dusk. He's a fine boy, Gage said as they mounted again. He is, Lila answered quietly. And now I've left him behind. You've shown him that sometimes a hard choice is the only road to freedom, Gage replied. That's worth more than you think. They rode on through deepening night until they made camp. Gage's men watched her with open curiosity, but asked no questions. They set aside a private spot for her, rough but respectful. An older cowboy named Zeke Carver brought an extra blanket when he saw her shiver. Don't mind the fellas, he said kindly. They're just not used to a lady riding with us. Good men, everyone. Thank you, Lila said, touched by his easy courtesy. Zeke chuckled. Boss wouldn't have it any other way. No drinking, no fighting, and sure as sunrise, no disrespect toward women. Lila glanced toward Gage, who stood over a map with another hand. He seems young to hold so much respect. Age don't measure character, Zeke replied. I've punched cows since before the war. Gage Hollis is the finest man I've worked for. Later, as Lila tried to settle on her bedroll, Gage approached with a steaming tin cup. This might cut the chill, he said, crouching beside her. Tomorrow we'll reach Baxter's Crossing. Small place, but there's a trading post to get you proper trail gear. She accepted the coffee gratefully. How much farther to Montana? About 10 days if weather and cattle behave, he said. We'll find a preacher before then. Better to have that marriage paper if your father catches up. Lila nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were in the quiet dark. Mr. Hollis, Gage, he corrected gently. If we're to be married even on paper, you might as well use my name. Gage. She echoed the name, strange yet steady on her tongue. Thank you for everything. I know taking on a wife you never asked for can't be easy. A flicker of amusement and something warmer crossed his face. Who says I don't want or need a wife? Lila. A true partnership can be worth more than gold out here. Before Lila could find the right words, Gage Hollis spoke again, quiet but sure. This arrangement is yours to shape. I won't ask for anything you don't freely give. With that, he rose his tall frame, outlined by the dying firelight, and returned to his own bedroll, leaving Lila Hart with thoughts that warmed and unsettled her all at once. The next days slid into a steady rhythm. Lila quickly caught the trail's pace up before dawn, working alongside the crew when she could. Around the fire, each night she surprised Gage with her knack for numbers, keeping his cattle ledgers neat as a freshly swept floor. Where'd you learn bookkeeping like that? He asked, amazed at her quick, sure calculations. My mother Lila Hart taught me, she said. She managed all the ranch accounts until she passed. Pa never had the patience for figures. When they stopped at Baxter's Crossing, Gage made sure she had trail clothes, a good hat, and a coat thick enough for Montana nights. He paid without a blink. Call it a wedding present, he said, with a grin that set her heart to fluttering. 4 days later, they reached Cottonwood Springs, a young town with a white-steepled church. Gage ordered a 2-day layover time to rest the herd and arrange their vows. That evening he found her by a quiet creek. "Are you certain?" he asked gently. "You still have time to change your mind." Droplets clung to her lashes as she looked up. Over these days she had come to respect him deeply. "I'm sure," she said, her voice firm. "Unless you've changed your mind," she added. "Not for a heartbeat," he answered, his steady eyes making her chest tighten. By morning she had pressed her best blue dress. One of the cowboys trimmed Gage's hair and helped him shave. When she met him at the church steps, the sight of him clean shirt coat, brushed dark hair still damp stole her breath. Pastor Clyde Boone led a short but heartfelt ceremony, smiling as if certain this was a love match. When he told Gage to kiss the bride, Lila tensed. Gage caught the flicker of unease and simply lifted her hand, brushing his lips across her knuckles. "I'll wait until you're ready," he whispered for her alone. The tenderness of that gesture struck her deeper than any grand kiss. When the marriage certificate was signed, she bore a new name, Mrs. Gage Hollis, a title that protected her from Cyrus Flint, even as it bound her to a man she was still learning to know. That night the cowboys lit lanterns and uncorked a modest jug of whiskey. A fiddle played under a sky full of stars. Gage held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Hollis?" She hesitated only a breath. "You may, Mr. Hollis." They moved in a slow waltz, his strength steady but never confining. His blue eyes never left hers, and for the first time she wondered if their marriage might become more than a simple agreement. Morning cut short their celebration. A telegram awaited. Gage read it, jaw tightening. "Your father sent word ahead. He's told Marshal Zane Porter that I kidnapped you. They'll be hunting us." Lila's heart sank. "What now?" "We have our certificate and witnesses," Gage said, slipping the paper safely away. "But we need to ride hard and stay ahead." They pushed north faster than planned. Lila felt herself growing stronger, her muscles, her spirit under the vast open sky that mirrored the freedom rising inside her. On the 8th day, a sudden summer storm swept in. Lightning split the air, spooking the herd. Several dozen steers bolted toward a deep ravine. "Stay back!" Lila Gage shouted as he and his men charged after them. But she spotted a young cowboy, barely older than Cody, thrown from his horse and square in the path of the stampede. Without thinking, she spurred her mare and raced into danger. "Grab my hand," she cried as thunder boomed. The boy Finn Doyle clutched her arm. With sheer determination, she hauled him up behind her just as the cattle thundered past. When the herd finally settled and heavy rain began to pour, Gage galloped to her side, face etched with shock and admiration. "That was either the bravest or the wildest thing I've ever seen," he said, rain streaming down. Still breathless, Lila met his eyes. Sometimes they're the same thing. Something shifted between them that night. Beneath a hastily pitched tarp, Gage wrapped an arm around her shoulders, sheltering her from the cold. For the first time, she let herself lean into his warmth, accepting it not as a cage, but as a gift. "Thank you for saving Finn," he murmured, his breath warm against her damp hair. "He's only 18. His mother. Rose Doyle would never forgive me if anything happened to him. You know his mother?" Lila Hart asked, curiosity bright in her tired eyes. "I know every family that trusts their sons to ride with me," Gage Hollis said. "Most of these boys have worked beside me for years. We look after each other." Lila smiled, struck by how different he was from Cyrus Flint, a man rumored to treat his workers as if they were nothing but tools. "You're a good man, Gage Hollis." He gave a low, warm chuckle that she felt against her side. "Don't sound so surprised, wife." The word wife sent a quick, unexpected thrill through her. Their marriage might be a contract on paper, But with rain drumming on the canvas and Gage's steady warmth beside her, she wondered what life might look like if it wasn't temporary. Morning broke clean and bright, the storm already past. As they rode on, Lila caught Gage watching her differently, like he was still replaying her fearless dash during the stampede. That evening, when the herd was settled and supper fires burned low, he walked toward her with something wrapped in a clean bandana. "Been saving this," he said, unfolding the cloth to show a small, hand-carved wooden horse. "My father taught me to whittle. It isn't fancy, but it's beautiful," Lila said softly, tracing the tiny grooves of the carving. "Made it bit by bit mostly while you were asleep," Gage admitted. "I wanted you to have something to remember this trail by, no matter what you decide 6 months from now." Lila looked up, catching the quiet depth in his eyes. For the first time, she let herself wonder if his feelings ran deeper than the deal they had struck. "Thank you," she whispered, closing her fingers around the keepsake. "I've come to admire you more every day," Gage said after a pause. "Your grit, your quick mind, the way you meet hardship head-on, it's rare." Warmth spread through her chest. "I respect you too, Gage." He smiled an unguarded, boyish smile that made him look years younger. "Sounds like a good start to me." 2 days later, the road tested them again. As they neared a small settlement to buy supplies, 3 riders emerged: Marshal Zane Porter and his deputies, Rex Crane and Buck Crow. Gage Hollis, the marshal called, one hand resting on his holstered Colt. "That's me," Gage answered evenly, though Lila felt the tension in him. "I've orders to hold you for kidnapping Lila Hart from her Wyoming home," Porter said flatly. Before Gage could speak, Lila urged her horse forward. "There's been a mistake, Marshal. I'm Lila Hollis now, and I left my father's house of my own free will." Porter's eyes narrowed. "Your father says otherwise, ma'am." "My father is mistaken," she said steady, despite her pounding heart. From her saddlebag, she produced their marriage certificate. "We were wed in Cottonwood Springs 5 days ago." The marshal read the paper slowly, then looked back at her. "Even so, I must be sure you weren't forced into this. I wasn't Lila cut in firmly. I chose to leave rather than be pushed into marriage with a man 3 times my age, a stranger my father picked to gain water rights." One deputy shifted uncomfortably. Porter rubbed his mustache, weighing her words. "The law doesn't smile on forced marriages. Is her account true, Hollis?" Every word, Gage said. Her father promised her to Cyrus Flint. "I gave her another path." At the name Flint, the marshal's expression changed. "Flint, huh? Heard stories about how his wives fared." He folded the certificate and handed it back to Lila. "Seems more like a family dispute than a crime. I'll wire your father that you've been found safe and sound and legally married." Relief swept through Lila, but Porter wasn't done. "I still have to file a report. You'll both need to come to my office and give formal statements. We're driving cattle north, Marshal. Every lost day costs," Gage said carefully. "It won't take more than a day," Porter replied. "Your crew can move the herd. You two can catch up once the paperwork's settled." Gage and Lila exchanged a quick look. Refusing would only raise suspicion. "Understood," Gage said. "We'll follow you in." The settlement of Pike's Bend was larger than Lila expected, lined with sturdy buildings and boasting a small hotel. Porter suggested they stay there while he completed the paperwork. "1 room will do," Gage told the desk clerk smoothly, his hand resting protectively at the small of Lila's back. "We are married after all." Color rushed to her cheeks, but she nodded. Better to leave no doubt. Once the door closed behind them, Gage immediately dropped his gear on the floor. "I'll take the floor," he said quietly, avoiding her eyes. "You have the bed." Lila stood there, a long breath, suddenly more aware of the man she'd married on paper than she had been under 1,000 miles of open sky. The close quarters of the small hotel room wrapped around Lila Hart, like a quiet spell far more intimate than the endless prairie nights. "Gage," she said softly, "what if Marshal Porter checks on us, or questions the hotel clerk about arrangements?" He paused, clearly having weighed the same risk. "You're right. We need to look convincing." He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "I'll stay on top of the covers. I give you my word." "I trust you," Lila answered, surprised to realize how completely she meant it. That night they lay side by side on the narrow bed. The steady rise and fall of Gage Hollis's breath, the scent of leather and pine that clung to him, these small things drew her closer than miles of open trail ever had. "Gage," she whispered into the darkness. His voice was rough with fatigue. "Thank you for keeping me safe." He turned slightly so she could sense his face near hers. "I'll protect you, Lila, for as long as you'll let me." The quiet certainty in his words made her heart skip. Almost without thinking, she reached out and slid her fingers into his. Gage's breath caught. Then he gently laced his hand with hers. They fell asleep that way, a simple bridge of trust spanning the small space between them. Morning came crisp and bright. By noon, they had given their statements to Marshal Zane Porter, who finally admitted he had no grounds to hold them. "I've wired both your father and the Wyoming authorities," Porter told Lila. "I can't promise your father will drop the matter, but legally your marriage outranks his claim." "Thank you, Marshal," she said, with genuine gratitude. Riding out of Pike's Bend, the couple urged their horses hard to catch up with the herd. A new ease settled over Lila. The hearing before the law had forced them to stand as a real husband and wife, and something inside her had shifted. "Do you think my father will stop now?" she asked as they crested a ridge that opened wide to the endless Montana sky. Gage considered. "Your pa strikes me as a proud man, and pride doesn't surrender quick. But he's practical. Once he knows you're legally wed, he might look for some other way to salvage his bargain with Cyrus Flint." Lila's stomach tightened. "What if Flint comes after me himself? He wanted those water rights badly." Gage's jaw hardened. "Then he'll answer to me. I don't scare easy." A shiver ran through her, born not of fear, but of the fierce certainty in his voice. For the first time in her life, she felt truly safe, not because she lacked courage, but because she no longer faced danger alone. By evening, they rejoined the cattle drive. The men greeted them with clear relief. Zeke Carver, who'd taken a kindly, grandfatherly interest in her, ambled over. "Everything square with you two?" he asked, his weathered face etched with concern. "The boys worried when the marshal hauled you off." "We're fine," Lila assured him. "Marshal Porter only needed proof I wasn't taken against my will." Zeke snorted. "As if anyone who's watched you and the boss together would think otherwise the way you two look when you reckon nobody's watching." Heat flushed Lila's cheeks. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course not, Mrs. Hollis. My mistake entirely," Zeke said with a sly twinkle. That night she caught herself watching Gage as he moved through camp, checking cattle, talking with his men, yet always aware of where she was. Their eyes met across the fire more than once, each glance carrying something unspoken and warm. The next day, they crossed the Montana line. Lila sensed Gage's excitement growing as he spoke of home, the strong timber house he'd built 2 years back, the sheltered valley with year-round water, the herd of prime stock he was raising. "It's no grand estate," he said, "but it's rich land and well protected from winter storms." "It sounds wonderful," Lila replied honestly, picturing herself in that quiet valley. "The house has 3 bedrooms," he added quickly. "You'll have your own if you wish. I meant every word about our arrangement. She nodded, but part of her felt an unexpected pang at his quick reassurance. Over the past days, she'd begun to wonder what life would be like as his wife in truth, not just in name. That evening, barely 2 days from Gage's ranch, a lone rider approached from the east. One of the cowboys spotted him first and called out. Gage moved to Lila's side hand, resting on the butt of his Colt. "Stay close," he murmured. The rider slowed as he neared, and Lila's heart clenched in recognition. Wade Mercer, her father's trusted foreman, reined in and removed his hat. Lila Wade called, keeping a respectful distance. "Your father sent me to bring you home. My wife goes nowhere she doesn't choose," Gage said evenly, his stance unyielding. Wade's eyes flicked between them, measuring the set of Gage's shoulders and Lila's nearness to him. "Mr. Hart only wants to talk with his daughter. He's camped 5 miles east." Lila felt Gage stiffen. "My father is here, in Montana." Wade nodded. "And Cyrus Flint is with him." A cold dread settled over her. Her father had come all this way, and he'd brought Flint. "I won't go," she said, her voice like iron. "Tell my father if he wishes to see me, he'll come without Cyrus Flint." Wade shifted uneasily. "Please, Lila. Your father isn't well." "The trail's been brutal on him, his legs giving him fits," Wade Mercer said quietly. "He only wants to be sure you're safe." Lila Hart hesitated, caught between her resolve to stand firm and the worry twisting at the thought of her father's pain. Gage Hollis read the conflict in her face. "We'll ride out together at first light," he said, just to hear him out. She blinked at him, surprised. "Are you sure it could be a trap?" His blue eyes held hers steady. "Do you trust me to protect you?" "Yes," she answered without a doubt. "Then we'll go on our terms," he decided, turning to Wade. "Tell Amos Hart we'll meet him tomorrow morning, but if Cyrus Flint shows his face, we turn back." Wade nodded, relieved. "I'll give him the message." "Thank you, sir." As the foreman rode off, Lila's anxiety flared again. What if my father tries to force me home? Gage caught her hands in his. "Lila, look at me. You're my wife now. Legally, he has no claim. And more than that, his voice softened. No one will ever drag you anywhere against your will. Not your father, not Flint, no one." She searched his face, finding only solid truth there. "Why are you doing all this for me, Gage? The real reason." For a moment, he seemed to wrestle with words. Then he drew a long breath. "Because somewhere on this trail, what started as an arrangement became something more for me." Her heart pounded. "For me too," she admitted barely above a whisper. Hope sparked in his eyes. Slowly giving her every chance to step back, he lowered his head until his lips hovered a breath from hers. "May I?" he asked. In answer, Lila closed the space, kissing him. What began tentative quickly deepened his arms, wrapping her close, as her hands rested on his shoulders, each holding the other like a promise. When they finally drew apart, Gage pressed his forehead to hers. "I've wanted to do that since Cottonwood Springs," he murmured. "I think I wanted you to," she said, a smile trembling through the words. That night they still kept their separate spaces, but something vital between them had changed. What had started as a bargain now felt alive and real. At dawn, Gage and Lila rode toward her father's camp, with Zeke Carver and another trusted hand as backup. They found Amos Hart exactly where Wade had set a small fire crackling in a clearing. Around it sat several men, including Cyrus Flint. Lila felt Gage tense as the older man rose his polished boots and tailored coat jarring against the rugged Montana hills. "Remember," Gage murmured, "you don't owe anyone a word. We leave the moment you wish." She nodded, drawing strength from him as they dismounted. Amos Hart stood at once, his lined face a mix of relief, anger, and something like regret. "Lila," he said, limping forward. "Thank God you're safe." "I've been safe the whole time, Father," she answered evenly. "Marshal Porter must have told you as much." "Safe." Amos bristled. "You call running off with a stranger and marrying without kin present safe? Safer than being forced to wed a man I'd never met," she countered, her eyes shifting to Flint, who rose and studied her with a calculating stare. "Mr. Hollis," Flint said smoothly, extending a gloved hand. "Perhaps we can discuss this like gentlemen." Gage ignored the hand. "There's nothing to discuss. Lila is my wife. Whatever deal you struck with her father is void." Flint's polite veneer cracked. "I've invested heavily on Mr. Hart's promise. Business agreements must be honored. My daughter is not a business contract," Amos said, suddenly turning from Flint to his daughter. Lila stared, startled. "Father, when Wade told me how you looked at this man, how he shielded you from the marshal, I saw what I'd done." Amos said, every year of toil etched in his weathered face. "I was so set on saving the ranch I lost sight of what truly matters." Flint's jaw tightened. "We had a deal, Hart water rights for her hand. I've already started diverting the creek." "A deal made without my consent," Lila said firmly. "You'll need another plan, Mr. Flint. And you," Gage added, his voice hard, "will find some other way to water your stock than trading a woman's life." Flint's eyes narrowed to slits. "I don't take kindly to wasted time, Hollis. I might just claim what was promised." His hand slid toward the pistol at his hip. In a heartbeat, Gage stepped in front of Lila, his own hand resting near his Colt. Behind them, Zeke shifted ready. "I wouldn't try it," Gage said, his tone cold and steady. "Not if you value your life." For a long moment, the clearing held its breath. Then Flint sneered and dropped his hand. "This isn't over." A bargain was struck. A bargain that's null and void. Amos Hart said, his voice like iron. "I was wrong to make that bargain," Amos Hart said, voice carrying the weight of hard years. "And I'm ending it now. You'll get your money back, Cyrus Flint, but the deal's finished." Flint's face twisted with fury. "You'll regret this, both of you." Without another word, he swung into the saddle and spurred away, his anger trailing like dust in the wind. Silence settled over the camp until Lila Hart looked at her father, a new respect rising in her chest. "Thank you," she said simply. "Don't thank me," Amos replied, his eyes heavy with remorse. "I should never have put you in that place." He turned to Gage Hollis, his gaze sharp. "Tell me straight, young man, do you truly care for my daughter?" Gage met the older man's eyes without flinching. "I love her, sir. I didn't expect it, but I do." Lila's breath caught her heart, soaring. "And you, Lila," Amos asked. "Do you love this man you've known barely 2 weeks?" She looked at Gage, the strength in his face, the kindness in his eyes, the man who had offered her freedom and given far more. "Yes, Father. I do." Amos exhaled slowly, but a faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Then I suppose I should offer my blessing, though I would have liked to give my daughter away in proper fashion." "You didn't give me away at all," Lila said, clasping his hand. "I chose. That's what matters." "I see that now," Amos admitted. He faced Gage. "You'll take good care of her. We'll take care of each other," Gage replied, his fingers threading through Lila's. That evening, Amos shared their campfire meeting Gage's men, and seeing for himself the respect they showed both trail boss and bride. Over supper, the talk turned to the future of the Hart Ranch. "Without those water rights, I don't know how we'll keep going," Amos confessed. "The drought's near ruined us." Gage thought a moment. "There might be another way. I've planned to expand my herd. What if I buy in as a partner? My capital can help through the dry spell, and together we can find a better water source than Flint's Creek." Amos frowned, surprised. "Why would you do that?" Because Lila loves that land, Gage said simply, and because Cody Hart deserves his inheritance. Lila's heart swelled at how clearly he understood what she valued. We could visit every year, she added. Help with spring branding and fall roundup. Amos's eyes lit with hope. Cody would like that. He's missed you something fierce. And I miss him, she said softly. Maybe he could spend summers with us, learn Montana ranching. As they talked, Lila realized their future was taking shape not through forced deals, but through honest trust and shared purpose. 2 days later, they rode into Gage's Valley Ranch, where mountains guarded wide green meadows and a bright creek sang along the eastern edge. The log and stone house rose larger than Lila had imagined, a deep-porched home built to last. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hollis," Gage said, lifting her from the saddle. Lila looked over the sweeping land and felt a deep certainty this was where she belonged, not by anyone's decree, but by her own choosing. That night, after the herd was settled and the cowboys had gone to their bunkhouse, Gage led her through the sturdy house. Sun-filled rooms, strong furniture, and big windows all spoke of steady work and quiet pride. Finally, he opened the door to a spacious bedroom where a handmade quilt lay across a broad bed. "This could be our room if you want it to be." Lila touched the quilt, moved by its warmth. "Did you make this?" "My sister, Ada Hollis, did," Gage said, voice softening. "She would have liked you, same fire, same will." Heart full, Lila turned to him. "I want this to be our room, Gage. I want this life with you not for 6 months, but for always." He crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering her close with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "I love you, Lila Hollis. I think I started falling the day you stood on that porch and chose freedom." "And I love you, Gage Hollis," she said, smiling through happy tears, "for seeing me as a partner, not a possession." When he lowered his lips to hers, Lila knew she had found more than freedom. She had found a man who honored her mind, her courage, and her heart. Outside, the Montana sun dropped behind the peaks, the sky burning gold and crimson. On the porch, 2 rocking chairs waited for the many evenings they would share, filled with stories, laughter, and a love born of choice and respect. A year later, Lila stood on that same porch, Gage's arms wrapped around her, his hands resting over the gentle curve of their unborn child. Nearby, Cody sat carving a small wooden horse under Gage's patient guidance, having come to spend the summer learning the Montana way of ranching. "Any regrets?" Gage asked, his breath warm against her ear. "Not a single one," Lila said, turning in his embrace to meet the gaze of the man who had given her more than safety. He had given her partnership, love, and the freedom to be exactly who she was meant to be. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you